Hi guys, these are the best settings to use in Black Ops 6, and this is for console and for PC, so depending on which you need, I've got chapters in the video so you can click through to the relevant parts of the content. Don't want to waste you guys any time, so without further ado, drop me a like maybe, and we'll get started. On console, we'll start with PS5 specific stuff here. You're going to want to go into your PS5 settings, go to screen and video, and then see if you can turn 120 Hz output on. And if you're on Xbox, you're going to want to go to Profile and System, Settings, General, and then there's a 120 Hz display option in there as well that you can also turn on. Then, in the Black Ops 6 settings, go to Graphics, Display, 120 Hz refresh rate, and turn that on. What that will mean is that there's less time between the frames that you're seeing, so essentially you have more time to react to things, and your game should just look a lot smoother. But if you don't have a 120 Hz monitor, you're not going to be able to get access to this because your monitor might cap out, for example, at 60 Hz refresh rate. And you also might have a fidelity CAS strength setting here, or some kind of sharpening setting, and I would set this fairly high. What this is going to do is anytime there is an edge of a surface in the game, instead of letting it be a little blurry at a distance, it's just going to add a bit of sharpening to make it a bit more crisp. So for example, if there's a bit of something sticking out from behind a ledge or something like that, and it's a little blurry without any sharpening, once you sharpen, it should have much more defined edges. Now, for on-demand texture streaming, this one's a mixed bag, okay? I think if you're going for pure crushing of all the enemies in multiplayer in front of you or in zombies or whatever, then setting it to optimized or low, essentially turning it off, is your best bet, just because you don't want extra demand on your network while you're playing the game. In view, set motion reduction to off, and field of view I would recommend to be in the 100 to 105 range. Basically, if you're at 120 FOV, yes, you feel like you can see more around you at any given time, which is useful, don't get me wrong, but the problem with that is that things in the center of your screen will appear further away with 120 FOV because the edges of the screen have had to be warped to push in all that extra stuff from your peripheral vision. But if you're on something like 100 FOV, you have a decent amount of peripheral vision still, but it's not making the center of your screen so small that aiming becomes more of a challenge. Blur to the game that need not be there. And if you're trying to see everything in front of you at all times, sure, a little bit of weapon motion blur, for example, can look kind of cinematic sometimes because that's how they shoot the Call of Duty trailers. But it's going to prevent you from seeing things, and in a competitive setting in multiplayer, or in a scenario where you're really trying to get a high round or really trying to focus in zombies, you just want to get those blurs turned off. Now, for controller, there are lots of changes this year, and so this is probably worth paying some attention to. Vibration off, obviously. Trigger effect off, I'd say. And you can tweak these based on if your controller has stick drift, obviously. Button layout, I'd suggest tactical personally, but that one's up to you. Sensitivity, if you're really trying to be a more competitive player, you're going to have a lower sensitivity because you're going to need more precision in the way you move your stick and how that responds in the game itself, and that's going to come with a lower sense. But if you're an absolute zoomer, insane nutcase, then yeah, sure, go for something higher. I quite like 5, but sometimes I'll tweak it up and go to around 8, but again, that's personal preference. And then in custom ADS settings, do ADS sense transition timing instant, aim response curve standard, and then custom sense for zoom on with your sense multiplier settings, basically matching the sort of thing that I'm showing you here. In movement settings, sprint assist I'd turn on. That automatically activates sprint after a sprint assist delay time. You can tweak this, obviously. Sprint assist sideways on, same thing but sideways. Backwards on, same thing but backwards. Mantle assist off, I would say, because you don't want to automatically mantle onto every single object that you hit in the game when you're running around, especially with Omni movement being in the game now, so I would turn that one off. Crouch assist off as well, same deal. That'll just make you crouch when walking or slide when sprinting, and it's sort of a contextual thing, so yeah, just turn that off. And your slide dive behavior should be hybrid, and this is controller only, but it decides how sliding or diving works with inputs, and I think that hybrid is the best way to go. Again, personal preference to some extent. In advanced movement settings, you've got walk speed fast, which is crazy that this is a thing. I can't believe this is a setting in the game. so important to turn this on. It'll help a ton in zombies, specifically by making you walk faster so that in those earlier rounds when you're not necessarily sprinting away in a given moment, but you are trying to just get out of there and keep those zombies away from you, you're going at the appropriate speed. Like, I can't believe that some people have this turned to other settings other than fast. And next we have some PC specific stuff. So on PC, I'd recommend display mode full screen. Sure, you can do window no border, but the problem then is that the application is not getting full resourcing from your system. It's still having to juggle other things that you have on your PC. And so if you go display mode full screen, it becomes the center of attention, a high process priority in your computer's task manager, and generally it's going to be able to allocate more resources to what you're looking at. VSync off, because VSync on will create some lag and input lag in your mouse movement. Reduce menu render resolution, I do native. HDR, I think, is somewhat personal preference. You can do this on console as well, actually. I like having HDR off personally, but HDR on should in theory mean that there's more dynamic range. That's what HDR stands for, high dynamic range. There's more dynamic range in the game, so that means that in a bright room, for example, you're going to be able to make out detail in the brightest parts of the room while also still being able to make out detail in the darkest possible shadows. That's the goal of HDR, so it's not a bad thing to have on by any means. I just personally don't like the way it looks a lot of the time, so I actually personally turn it off, but automatic I think is fine. Everything in details and textures you can turn down as it's a performance thing. Your gameplay itself will be absolutely fine, but obviously if you want the game to be prettier, then turning your textures up, for example, if you've got a lot of RAM and you've got a lot of dedicated video RAM, so that's the RAM associated with your graphics card memory, then that's totally fine to do as well. Shadow quality, I would keep normal at minimum, but everything else I would set to low, unless you're really worried about seeing enemies in reflections, for example, in which case you can up these a little bit. Tessellation I would set off, water quality is up to you, and turn on NVIDIA Reflex, which will help with input lag as well. And you can also whack on things like DLSS, etc. if you're having performance issues. However, if you're not having any performance issues, I'd get rid of DLSS, to be honest, and I would just say play with the game rendered as it is at base. And similarly, if your performance is fine, if your system is really strong, then a lot of these things that I've said to set to low, you can absolutely turn up based on your needs and desires and just what you're trying to achieve in the game. If you're doing the most hardcore competitive experience, stuff set on low is just gonna be the best option. If you want a really pretty experience, obviously whack your settings up, that's fine. But whichever way you go, I hope this video has been useful. Drop a like if it has been, and I'll see you next time.